Hi, my name is Kevin Oliveira. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for Data Security Solutions at Forcepoint. And today I'm going to be joined by Erez Epstein. He's a consulting sales engineer in EMEA for Forcepoint as well. And we are going to be talking about how to reduce your overall compliance risk and how you're able to eradicate this using a new product that we've just released, Forcepoint Data Visibility. So first of all, what is your customer's risk for non-compliance right now? It's an important question for each organization to really understand and to be able to address very clearly what is their risk right now for non-compliance. The reason is non-compliance for all the regulations that are out there is quite expensive. In general, organizations lose an average of nearly $6 million in revenue for every single non-compliance event. And the total cost, if you consider all the different things that go into the impact that a non-compliance for a regulation can take, it could be up to about $14 million. This was calculated by the Ponemon Institute. Forcepoint Data Visibility can help our customers because we are able to use an AI ML model, which looks into the files and predicts compliance risk. I'll explain a bit just the different pillars of risk that it looks into. We have risk levels that we're able to filter within the main dashboard. And then we also have a very strong risk report on compliance based on these 5 pillars of risk. The 5 pillars of risk are these ones listed here. First one is around content. So what happens is the Forcepoint Data Visibility looks inside the content and identifies PII, PHI, sensitive data, looks inside, and is able to find out what's going on with that file. There's a dynamic risk. What that is it looks over time and looks for anomalies. So if there's a lot of sensitive information that's created and it's anomalous to what's typically done in a particular month, that's also another sign, and it's showing risk. The third area is endpoint risk. And so what that does, one is if you use Forcepoint Data Classification, it's a very good product to use with Forcepoint Data Visibility. And that product, it can track if users are using the classification that's suggested within Forcepoint Data Classification. If they're not doing it, and consistently not doing it, that could be bringing in some compliance risk. And also looking at the amount of sensitive data on individual endpoints. So the Forcepoint Data Visibility can give you the visibility to see what's on every endpoint. And then there's access risk, looking at permissions in particular, if there's overprivileged individuals or shares, or if there's certain files that have open access to far too many people. It looks at Active Directory hygiene, looks at if the passwords are regularly updated, and that's called access risk. It evaluates that. And then there's also audit risk, which is actually a comprehensive survey that an organization would do at the outset of a deployment for Forcepoint Data Visibility.
So as you can see, I've already run a scan on one of my file shares, and I've got a report here. I will filter first for the low-risk files. But before filtering, I want you to know that I've got 754 files. What I'm interested in right now is mostly the low-risk files and files which hold PII. So you can see we got down to about 16 files. And if I'm going to look at the attributes of the files which we have found, I can see that the category, subcategory, and classification were auto-populated using the MI and AI and ML model of Forcepoint Data Visibility. We already got also a low risk, and this is a combination of the category, subcategory, and classification. If I'm going again for the filter and checking for the high risk file, I can see that I've got 2 files which got very high risk. And the reason for that, again, because of the AI and ML model found that those are correspondence files with classification of confidential. I've got another file, which is internal document and general business, which was considered high risk. Let's choose.
Both those categories too, aren't they both considered sensitive as far as within the taxonomy for categorization?
Yes, exactly. They are considered sensitive, and that's one of the reasons for the high risk.
Right.
If I'm going to choose the first file, I will click on Show Permissions, and we can see that something really, really strange happened here. We can see that the lab users got full control. So this is something, of course, which shouldn't happen. And that's maybe one of the main factors which contributed to the high risk of the file.
Is there anything about that file in particular, though, that like lab users, you would not expect them to have permission for it? Would you think?
So this is actually of a subcategory correspondence, and we can see by the file name that is all information about RSA. So I can tell you for sure that this is a file which lab users shouldn't have access to. And I guess this was maybe a mistake of over-permissioning the file, or maybe someone didn't notice that lab users were given full control. It's not even read-only, it's full control of the file.
Right. Well, it looks like even with lab users, probably they shouldn't have any kind of permissions for this particular file. So that could be contributing to a high risk, it seems.
Exactly. Now let's go to the report section, and we can run an executive report. Just click on the risk report, and the report will be generated on the fly. So I already got it ready in this tab. And this is, as you can see, an executive report of 2 pages, but the 2 pages very, very specific, which give information to our management about the risk associated with the file in the organization. So we've got 2 types of risk in this report. Data risk score is between 1 to 10, 10 representing very, very high risk and 1 low risk. And in this page, we'll talk about the content risk score, which is the risk associated with the content itself. In the second part of the page, we can see the dynamic risk score. But first, let's go over the content risk score. So we've got here 6 groups of risk. First one, critical files in share. So as you can see, we've got a high grade of sensitivity, which is 7. And the reason for that, there have been a lot of files which have been found. But again, that didn't contribute to the risk. But we can see that most of them are classified files, and most of them are considered critical based on the AI and ML module. Precisely 64% of the files. We can go below, and we can see that some of these critical files are duplicate, which means that we've got the same content scattering around the network and critical content, which is
what specifically is the problem of having duplicates? Why would that be a risk?
The problem that if one file is critical, it's a risk. But if we've got that file maybe 5 times or 10 times around the network, then it's multiplying the risk for you. It's again, you need to manage the permission for all of those files, and you need to monitor all of those files. So you're actually multiplying the risk for your organization, and that's why we got a very, very high score of 8.
Okay, so that makes sense. You're multiplying the risk because you have more of that data out there, and so more opportunities for data breaches, more opportunities for exfiltration. So that
opportunities for mistake even.
Right.
So someone mistakenly taking out the content or doing something with it.
Mm-hmm.
We can see below highly accessible critical files. So 4 is not low, but it's not considered really high. So we can see that some of the critical files are highly accessible based on the permissions that we can see. And we know exactly that it's highly accessible by more than 50% of our users in the organization. If we can go to the right, we can see the score got a bit higher because these critical files are now in everyone group. So everyone in the organization got access to it.
What is the everyone group, and is it always called everyone group? What is that?
The everyone group is an internal group. It should actually include all the users in my organization. So if there is some file which is accessible by all of the users, it will be owned by the everyone group, and we can easily filter and create a report based on that.
Okay. So it makes sense to have an everyone group. It's just that there's a lot of critical files in this particular one. Exactly. It just would not make sense, it sounds like.
No, it does make sense that such a large number of critical files are owned by the everyone group. I don't know, right. Unless you are a huge organization, but even for a huge organization, I don't believe that more than 900K files should be accessible for the everyone group.
Right.
We can see below critical stale files, files which were considered critical by AI and ML and have not been modified or touched for 2 years. So this is files which are risk, and usually, as we said in the previous webinars, I will move them to some kind of archive or quarantine or maybe backup.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, I risk with a score of 8 critical files which are accessible to inactive users. So this is very, very dangerous. Inactive users, many times users which are disabled, or maybe employees which have left the company, but their account is still available, but inactive. So, and they still got the access. The access to the file wasn't revoked. So this is very, very high risk.
Right.
And down below, we can see the dynamic risk score. So this is not specifically about the content on the file, because again, we know that the organization is working with files which are sensitive, but we can see a chart of the critical files created over a period of time. And if I see that the percentage, the number of files is growing rapidly, I can see that there is a growing risk for the organization and something that needs to be carefully investigated because it may be indicative of a policy or security issue happening right now in my organization, and it's better to check what it is before it will be too late.
Now this one got a 7. Is this particularly because it looks like September is pretty unusual in terms of the amount of critical files created?
Yeah, exactly. We can see a huge jump from August to September. So this gave us a very high risk. Over time, this can get a lower risk, but at this moment, 7 is pretty high. Maybe something will change, maybe some kind of permission issue. Many files may be created, I don't know, maybe there is some kind of software or automated process. And again, this is something which I will investigate carefully.
Okay. So once you've got this report, then what would be the next steps? Or how would this report be used?
So usually I will go with this report to the management to discuss about an action plan. And once I get the action plan, I will go back to the Forcepoint Data Visibility UI and go to the results folder and check specific risk of files, or maybe even specific categories which I want to investigate. I
think the other important thing with these risk reports is they're very, very good management reports. And so it's like if you're able to you get a snapshot in time, this is what it looks like. And then ideally you start working and that risk number comes down. And so you would bring it down. And so you want to know how risky your organization is at any moment. And so to try to bring it down from an 8, get it down to a 1 or a 2 would be the goal. Well, thank you for the demo, and thank you for watching this video. If you're watching this, we do have more videos on Forcepoint Data Visibility. You can also see them on our website. You can go to our website for this. It's forcepoint.com/visibility and get more information about this exciting new product. Thanks.